Hello everybody. Welcome to the oh shit. Sorry. No, another take.
You're watching Skirllz.
Coming to get you, Barbara.
Hello everybody. Welcome back to the Skirllz podcast, episode 32. And I'm not joined by my usual co-hosts. I'm instead joined by a very special guest, Jared from Avalanche Reviews.
Hey, how you doing?
I'm kind of starstruck right now. Thank you sincerely for coming on the show. This is really cool opportunity to get to talk
not a
to
problem
you.
at all, man.
Because
I love doing this stuff.
I've been watching your content. You seem just like a really down to earth, chill guy, and I just wanted to pick your brain a little bit about film because I know that's not really something you talk about often.
Not too much, yeah.
That I know of anyway.
But it is a big interest of mine too. It's harder on YouTube to make a movie review than it is a game. You will get copyright struck at one point. I mean, I did the Resident Evil movies for a while, and it is guaranteed during the upload process I'll get the copyright strike. The question is whether or not they'll give me the when I fight it, whether or not they'll decide in my favor or theirs.
Do you try to re-upload it with like stuff cut out, or?
I have a shotgun spray effect when that happens. I will re-edit some of the effects. I'll add like a scan line effect overlay or maybe film damage or something that might trick up the algorithm that senses this stuff, and I'll upload that. But while I'm uploading that, I will also fight the copyright strike, and I think it's 30 days they have to respond to it, and then it just decides in your favor, which sometimes they do. They have a bot that just strikes everything that sort of looks like their content, and then they don't necessarily look at their inbox for that bot.
Right.
Hey, this person fought it, by the way. They're just like, because they know the majority of people will just go, all right, fuck it, then fine. So if you upload a different version and fight the copyright strike at the same time, one of those two is bound to work at some point. So you just keep that process up until you've made 10 versions of the same movie review, or
oh my gosh,
it's been 30 days.
That's like such an uncertain process.
Yeah, there's a lot of problems with it.
Yeah.
The movie companies, or specifically Google, does not want to be sued by the movie production houses and these big music industry conglomerates. So they're like, all right, it's out of our hands. If you have a problem with what a user does with content you think is yours, it's between you two. I get that, because you don't want to be legally culpable for someone listening to Sepultura on your platform. At the same time, I think that they could be a better mediator between the two groups, because as it is now, the person who claims that you've infringed their copyright, they have all the power. They have the decision-making power. So if you say, no, actually this falls under fair use, they can say, no, it doesn't. And that's what's correct at that point.
Yeah.
So it's flawed, but I don't necessarily see a way it couldn't be, where Google isn't eating some form of that risk.
Right. It is literally YouTube now. You deal with it, not us. We're not gonna fight for you.
And that is precisely how it's set up.
Yeah. I wish I would have dabbled. I mean, I dabbled a little bit in YouTube, uploading skating videos actually when I was a kid. Don't know what the channel was called. Can't pull it up for you right now because my brother mainly overlooked that. But I've always been on YouTube, but I didn't know how it worked. So I assumed it was like a better landscape than it is now, for sure.
I mean, you figure it would be, but no.
Really?
It makes, like I said, though, it does make sense. This is a company who's looking to make money, and realistically speaking, they don't make any more or less money if they're on my side during a copyright dispute, right? On one end, it would be good to build good faith among the people who use your product if you show them that you stand behind them as well. But it's YouTube. It's I think the second or first largest search engine on planet Earth. it doesn't, people are going to use your service. You make money regardless. You don't necessarily have to help out someone who, while 100,000 subscribers is a lot in the grand scheme of things, I'm not even in the, top 90% of people who make money off of YouTube. And people out there with, 80 million subscribers or something, I don't matter so much. And when there's a copyright issue, I can understand them saying like, hey, we're not getting involved in this nonsense,
Right. They're not.
I get it. It sucks and it's not fun to deal with and it's a bad way to run things. I just don't see it as working any other way. Right.
They're not morally obligated to, and I wouldn't really fault them for having like a biases, like, this huge creator kind of represents us in a way. So we kind of have to control the situation if things get out of hand for this certain creator or
they
whatnot.
Can step in,
Right, yeah. But
it makes sense. I mean, if I meet a guy on the street who tells me one thing and my best friend tells me another, who am I going to side with?
Exactly.
It's not fun to say, but if me and Ethan Klein were to have a fight on YouTube, obviously they're going to go with the creator that they have a close relationship with versus some guy. 100K, I'm not even big enough to be on YouTube's radar at this point. I couldn't tweet at them and they would answer, right? So it makes sense. It's the way stuff goes. When you're working at a place, the manager has a friend he hired, that guy's going to get treated better. It sucks, but you would probably also do that.
Right. Yeah, like I said, I don't fault them because it's just business, man. Don't take it too personally. Yeah. That would be kind of interesting. What would theoretically, what would you think you and Ethan would beef about? Because your contents are very radically different.
I mean, I don't know. I just don't feel like I like the guy. He seems pretty dishonest, and a lot of times his opinion or the way he feels about things seems to be dictated by like the winds of social change, so he doesn't really have any opinions or beliefs. It's more of the people
the
who follow
social climate
him, they think
of the time. Yeah.
That's how it works. I mean, because when it was cool to be edgy, he was edgy, and now that it's not cool to be edgy, he has to be. He's the guy who calls out people who are edgy, and sure, not even to say that he's not correct in calling people out for bad behavior. It's just that can't be where that's coming from.
It kind of seems disingenuous.
Yeah. If I were to like comment on a YouTube video saying this video is too long and like there's too much detail. That maybe I would be right, but that criticism can't be coming from me.
Right, you have a 7-hour video about what was it, every Resident Evil title?
Yeah, but I mean, and still to this day, the only officially released title missing is the 3DS. Oh, Christ.
I know the one. I know the one you're talking about. Which could you really call that a game?
Exactly, that's my reasoning. And then also, I wouldn't be able to capture it on real hardware, which isn't the worst thing in the world, but I would like to do that. And it wouldn't feel right. Here, I'm going to review this game. It's an emulator. There's no investment for me whatsoever. Also, I don't really think it's a video game per se, more than, something you would have on your phone to kill time on the bus.
Mode. Yeah.
It was a whole thing, but I did put together all that stuff. That's the fun thing, is you work on these individual videos and they're really cool, and then you lump them in under this category like the Resident Evil retrospective, all the RE movies or all the RE clones. You put them all together, and that's what I like to watch and go to sleep to from other people. So I figure, people want to see that if I want to see it, and so far, people have been pretty into it. I like it.
Yeah. That's the beautiful thing about the internet. There's an audience for everything.
That's true.
But unfortunately, the podcast market is like oversaturated.
For sure. Yeah.
It seems like everyone has a podcast.
Yeah.
And I wasn't really cognizant because me and my friends, we've always wanted to do a podcast since podcasts were still like popular in 2014, 2015, around the time we wanted to do it. But it was like the way we wanted to do it was kind of like relatively new. There wasn't much like on camera, which we don't really do much on camera stuff nowadays anyway, but we wanted to do it on camera. I mean, of course you already have like Joe Rogan and all of them that's on camera, but it's much more prevalent now. But
Oh, for sure. Yeah.
I do love podcasting though. It'll always be a part of me, but it is something I'm like, man, it just seems everyone's got one. It's cool, and I'm glad it's like readily available to creators.
Yeah.
But I don't know. It just
It
kind
does
of
seem like harder to grow as a podcast. You know, I mean, if you're a YouTube, like video specific content creator, if you're really skilled at editing, or you have really high quality footage, or access to information people don't have, you know, there's ways where your skill can overcome, you know, because, you know, gaming on YouTube is pretty oversaturated too.
for sure, yeah.
And as you start to show skill or a very specific person or something that people can latch on to, you can improve those things. Whereas with a podcast, once you start out with, like, you have a sure SM7B and, you know, video, the skill starts to less become a factor, and it's more, I mean, were you lucky enough to have 10 really influential people watching your podcast at some point, sharing it around? That seems to be, at least from the outside looking in, how a podcast would get popular, is you either were already popular or by random happenstance you got that way.
Yeah. And it's kind of, it's much harder nowadays by like random happenstance that someone stumbles across it and whatnot. But we have like branching channels. Me and the three casts, we do videos on our own volition, and but this was just kind of created because we love to hang out with each other and we love to talk about film. So if it picks up, totally fine with me. If not, totally fine with me as well. It's just like a nice hobby, if you will, or a way to express ideas without having to write out a script and make a video on it and kind of stress over that for the next 2 months. Kind of just like give our cliff notes about how we feel about a particular film, or, you know, shoot the shit if we want to. But
there is something valuable about being able to not stifle yourself through having a script and pre-thinking your ideas out. Because sometimes in the moment you think of an analogy or an allegory that perfectly encapsulate what you're trying to talk about. So when you're just doing things off the top of the dome, I don't know, it helps. You can get a more honed in like response to what you're trying to think about, versus if you script it out, it can sort of seem, I don't know.
I get what you're saying. Kind of like if you script something out, it's like maybe you wouldn't word it in the most genuine way as you usually would. Yeah, so
for sure.
It's kind of like, oh, well, if I'm going to go that route, I might as well know, I don't know, this will please the audience if I add this in. But maybe if you're just talking off the dome, maybe you don't really appreciate that aspect all that much as you would like to. And, you know, you could kind of be, not saying that scripting of anything is disingenuous, but like, I don't know. There's something about off the cuff, just kind of rambling, kind of, it speaks for itself rather than.
Absolutely. Yeah. And they're both awesome approaches. I do, you know, when I stream, it's really fun to stream of consciousness, just speak on a subject and whatever comes to your head, that's how you explain it, versus sitting down and really understanding why you feel a certain way and then writing that out.
Towards it. Yeah. And sometimes, like, if you even thinking of like how you want to word something, talking about it, you'll be pacing around your room for about 30 minutes. It's like, what would be the best, most interesting way to, you know, explain this thing or showcase it. So there is something beautiful for both crafts, absolutely. And I mean, people love listening to you. You're awesome to listen to. I'm surprised you don't have a podcast at this point. Maybe it's, you know.
Well, you know what? I sort of did for a while. My wife really wanted to do a podcast, and I was like, hey, you know, I'm down. So she started it up. It was called Attack Up, ATKUP, and then exclamation point. And we had a lot of fun with it, but she was working a full-time job at the time, and it was a management job. So it was one of those things where even when she's off, she's getting texts from the employees, hey, how do we open the register this way or whatever? So we didn't have as much time, and now that we do, we just haven't gotten around to starting it back up, but I think we will, because stuff like this is fun. You just talk about something until you can't anymore.
Yeah, it's absolutely. I don't think we can explain. I think we'll be going around in circles trying to, well, me personally trying to explain it, but we're talking about today. Perfect segue. I'm known for that. Segue into Night of the Living Dead, Tom Savini's remake of the classic George A. Romero's Night of the Living Dead from 1968. And this is one if not one of is it your favorite zombie movie or just like in that ballpark?
I think it might be. I think so. Yeah. There's definitely like a nostalgia factor to consider. So it's not, the best made film ever made, but yeah, I think if you combine all of the rose tinted glasses from remembering seeing it as a teenager, it's probably my favorite.
I have a funny story for you because I've already seen the original one, right? So I was like, oh yeah, that's what I thought you were talking about first with your DM. I was like, oh yeah, I can't wait to talk about that one. And I was like, wait a minute. There seemed like there's more detail that I'm forgetting. And I looked at back at the tweet. You're like, Tom Savini's Night of the Living Dead. I'm like, I've actually never seen that one. So this was a first viewing for me.
Oh, yes.
So I have no nostalgic ties to it at all or any rose tinted glasses for it. And I will say I did really enjoy it, but I think I got to choose the original. As a preference.
I'm on the other side of that camp. I mean, the original is great, and especially if you take into account the like how they made it so great, because it was such a low budget, and the way they shot it, and then George Romero not showing what else was happening, around, because it's centralized on this one house, because they didn't have the budget to include a bunch of locations, so. It ended up, and maybe this wasn't on purpose, but it felt so personal and private, and like you got an idea of like this small little microcosm of the full apocalypse that was happening around it. It was so cool. So I get where people are coming from for sure, but there's something about the Savini remake that just does it for me.
I can understand that completely. Yeah, it's so cool with like budget constraints, how much creativity shines through with just like being limited to something. Now we have movies just being way too expensive for their own good, and it is turn out pretty bad. Like there's hardly any heart. Of course there's still some directors that are amazing at their craft making films these days, but it's kind of like it's not how it used to be, It's cliche, but it's just not how it used to be.
I mean, and it's not like it's not how it used to be in like the 60s. Like recently, when I grew up in the 90s getting into film, that was the time of like high concept movie making for sure. But the idea is, okay, how interesting is your idea? Let's make a movie out of that. Tower Records. You can make a Tower Records today. There's nothing really it does. It's just a tale of really weird misfits that work at a record store. But nowadays, like you said, production prices are so high because they want to get the entire
risk.
It's like the video game industry. It's gotten to the point now where video game development prices have gone so high that there's no more. They've reached diminishing returns for how much money they're putting into the project, because there's only so many people who can buy a video game, and you're spending millions and millions of dollars. So if you're doing that, then for sure the people who run your company are going to say, hey, crafting's pretty popular right now, and we do need to make back the millions and millions of dollars we're spending on this game. Maybe throw that in. And I think with movies, it's the same thing. It's getting so expensive to make them that you have to include all the elements of the rainbow. You can't have a film noir. You can't do that anymore because you're going to spend millions of dollars and then no one's going to come and see it. So it does kind of suck. We used to have these really interesting concepts for movies, and now it's just like, if it's not an established idea, not doing it. Exactly. If it's not a property that's already popular, fuck out of here with that original script. I think though the pendulum tends to swing in the extremes and return after a while. I think we will see Hollywood take a more individualized, personal approach to movie making again. We're just going to have to see a pretty big crash in Hollywood as far as like ticket sales and stuff like that. And then
Right.
whatever comes out that's new, they'll be desperate. That'll be what catches on. And I can't help but feel like, a more personalized, unique movie is gonna, we'll see them more and more in theaters starting pretty soon, because the whole COVID thing basically crashed Hollywood as it is. So at this point, it's like, we just got to release something that someone can watch, and we'll probably get something good out of that.
Also, with like the rising popularity in streaming services, I feel I haven't seen much high concept stuff from like originals released via digital, but something that's different for the most part. I think that market will bring an onslaught of like newer directors wanting to do something ambitious. Like Netflix, for example, it's from my knowledge, I think it's pretty cheap to make something with that production. It doesn't always turn out good, but I appreciate the strive for like a concept that you wanted to act
absolutely.
out. So
yeah, I mean, there's definitely ups and downs with Netflix greenlighting literally everything, but the ups are you get to see some concepts you normally wouldn't, and that's dope as hell.
Absolutely. So do you think you could get into a little bit of why you prefer Tom Savini's remake?
Yeah, sure. There's a lot of reasons. Starting with the nostalgia aspect of it, I was really into Resident Evil as a kid, and you knew about the concept of Night of the Living Dead. Growing up in the 80s, it was in pop culture. Everybody was talking about Night of the Living Dead. So I was aware of it existing, but to me, my concept of like zombie media was Resident Evil. So when I saw this movie, I watched it the whole way through. It was back before we had the TV guide that was on screen. You had to just flip through channels and see what was on. And I stopped on the monologue that Tony Todd's character has, Ben, where he's talking about his experience in Carson City. And as a kid, a teenager, probably 13, 14 years old, you're flipping through the channels, and then you see like a monologue of a serious drama, what it looks like to you. Something told me though, so like, hold on, what's all this about, right? And it's Tony Todd just talking, and he hadn't mentioned a zombie yet. And as he keeps talking, I noticing, oh yeah, one of them, or the group are rounding him up and putting him in trucks. And it's like, oh shit, this sounds like he could be talking about The Walking Dead of some kind. I just ended up watching the whole movie from there and waiting till the end, till I saw like Capcom's logo in the credit screen or something. I assumed, it's like, you can't just make a zombie movie without crediting what was in my mind the progenitor zombie series, right? So there is a nostalgia baked into that, and that first experience being really cool and memorable. But on top of that, I really like the practical effects Tom Savini uses. Some of them aren't great, like Uncle Rege's body double when Barbara's hitting it with a fireplace, like the poking iron. Yeah, it kind of looks bad, but right after that scene, Ben puts a crowbar through a zombie's head. And to this day, I don't know how he achieved that effect. I've watched it in slow motion. It looks like he's plunging a crowbar into an actor's head. Unless the crowbar was compressible. But I don't know. That seems that the budget for that movie wasn't so great that they could fabricate, a collapsing crowbar at the point. I don't know. It just looks so convincing. Or like a replica
of his head, like
it seems. Lifelike. And then the way the face is moving, it seems like it is genuinely this guy's head. You could see him making faces and stuff. But the practical effects, some of them are just fucking mind-blowingly good.
He's a master of that craft, man.
Yeah, he absolutely is. It sucks nowadays that we're moving so far away from practical effects, because they could look so good, but then realistically, CG is so much easier.
Absolutely,
yeah. But that's two of the reasons. I think the last one is just that what I was talking about before that was so cool in the original is that isolation the movie shows you. You're cut off from everyone, and then like Cooper downstairs is like, we can get to such and such city. It's 10 miles. We can make that in fumes, and Ben says, oh, it might as well be 100 miles. And I was like, yeah, that's how this movie makes me feel, like I'm isolated in this old house out in the woods. I don't know, something about that just works. And then
It's very
zombies.
polarizing. Yeah, it's you felt unsafe the whole time because it's like this older house, you know, it's like all made out of wood, probably, you know, termites, you know, deconstructed it somewhat, and they have to board up the windows and the doors, and there's this like very tense feeling that you don't, I mean, you still get it in modern zombie media, but it's not as prevalent as that feeling that the original and the remake kind of invoke. So
yeah, for sure. I totally agree. I think it's because it's on such a small scale. It's a single house.
It's very
4 or
personable.
5 people. Yeah. Whereas, like, I mean, don't get me wrong. I love Train to Busan. It was so good, but it was so big. There was such a big scope to it. In Night of the Living Dead, both the original and the remake, the scope was sort of in your own mind. You know, you saw the news broadcast. This is happening globally, or at least in the U.S., but we never saw that visually. So that's all up here. And I think a majority of those movies, for most people, they filled in a lot of the blanks up there with their imagination. That's why it's so good.
Yeah.
So I've always really appreciated that very small, you take, you know, a big scale event and zoom it into the most personal level. I like that a lot.
I know there's like, at least in the original Romero one, there's like some social commentary to it. All that I could kind of see is that even as humans, if you try to work together, you know, there's always going to be some differences, of course, even for like trying to achieve the greater good.
Yeah.
Which is kind of, I don't know, I feel it's kind of shallow commentary, but there could be something deeper. I haven't researched it. I just always knew that was surrounding the film is like, oh, it's really known for its social commentary. It's really smart in that way. But I was like, I just kind of want to watch it as a zombie movie. It's better looked that way. But I could certainly see merit in that. And I don't know if it was purposeful. I think George would say it is, because I've genuinely tried to look for the social commentary watching the original and also Dawn of the Dead, but I don't really see it. Like there's something about consumerism in Dawn of the Dead. I don't know.
Well, yeah, but Dawn of the Dead, the consumerism though is sort of like, it was there and there was a single scene where they pointed out verbally, but realistically, if it is a message, you don't have to see that, which is great. You know, it's like reading an X-Men comic. You know, the original 1960s run of the X-Men was just an allegory for race relations and in the U.S. for sure.
The mutants.
Yeah, and as a kid, I didn't know, you know, going back and reading those comics, I didn't see that because I grew up in, you know, a climate where that just was not the norm. So you would never see that. And, you know, with Night of the Living Dead, you can certainly say that there is social commentary in it, but I wouldn't say it makes or breaks the movie. That's just a fun little, like, when you're watching a movie and you say, oh, did you know that What's-His-Face's cousin worked on that movie? Oh, cool. And that's as far as it goes.
It's a fun fact, or sort of... Yeah, I get that. And it's
but
probably
George Romero's stuff. You were right that he would say that it's on purpose. His whole goal with making movies is always, but it turns out people are the real monsters, which is cool because with each movie he delves into that in a different way. You know, in Dawn of the Dead, you have the motorcycle guys riding around, and like you see that when the world ends, people will still be the biggest threat. And with stuff like Night of the Living Dead, you have the conflict between two. I almost saw it as a kind of like alpha male like commentary when you get two people who think that, you know,
they're the boss. They're the leader.
Exactly.
Yeah,
they're both hard-headed. They're both assertive, and they both want to call the shots. So he does a good job of taking that wide idea and then doing different stuff with it in each movie. But realistically, it is kind of a trite. But it turns out people are the real bad guys.
Yeah, and it certainly, you know, I wasn't around that time, obviously, but it's probably profound for that time. But it's such an overplayed trope now to it's like, well, of course humans are the biggest threat in this.
Yeah, and that is a good point.
Yeah. And I love, I can't think of any examples off the top of my head, but I love when a movie or game just focus on the zombies, like Resident Evil. That's the threat, is the zombies. Except, you know, 4, 5, and 6, where it's like, I don't even know where they're trying to go with that one. Mutants, not zombies.
No, I'm totally with you. As a matter of fact, with Resident Evil, the zombies were always my, like, I like to play it as a zombie game, right? And the fact that there are other things in there like liquors are awesome. But if Resident Evil 2 was a game filled with zombies exclusively, I would not complain about it.
But you always had those tyrants. I think even from the first one, right? Wasn't there one at the...
Yeah, you had tyrants and hunters and Plant 42 and Neptune. But and those are extras, I guess. But with Resident Evil 1, the real focus was on zombies. And that's how I liked it. I wanted it to stay that way.
Yeah. I think I'll feel like that once I start playing through RE2 Remake. Because I know what's to come, like the Mr. X and all that, the liquors. But like at the very beginning where it's all zombies, I really love that atmosphere and like that.
It's so good.
Dreariness.
Dude, it's so good.
Yeah.
They do a really good job. A lot of people comment, and the idea is like, well, just because it's dark doesn't mean it's scary. It's like, no, but the fact that it's dark, the sound design really helps with the horror in RE2 Remake.
Oh my
you know
gosh,
there's zombies
dude,
in there. You know they can go through doors. You're almost never safe. Now, if you've beaten the game, you know that's not true, and there are places you can go where scripted events won't allow zombies to come in or whatever. But realistically, on a first playthrough, like me, I stayed away from all the reviews, media, trailers, everything. I booted it up at night, and I played it the entire night. The sun came up, and I was still playing it, and I just absolutely did not know what was coming next. I didn't know what rooms were safe. And yeah, that atmosphere it's there. It's for real.
For sure. It like nothing really scares me anymore, but it spooked me because I got it around like night or whatever last Thursday night.
Yeah.
And I wasn't expecting that the zombies could break through the doors. So that like when I heard boom boom on the door, it caught me off guard. And also I've been so spoiled with 4, 5, and 6. I thought the knife that you get at the beginning was indestructible, but it deteriorates over time. I'm like, oh man, I just used all my knife. But I digress. For me, the original, I like that the tone better. I think it was more tonally appropriate. Maybe it's just because 90s for me all 90s movies kind of have this like particular tone they all strive for. I don't know if that makes sense, but just to me personally. But I don't know, is there something about the original being in black and white I think really adds to the atmosphere of it?
I feel like, and again, I do enjoy the original, but it was a product of its time. A lot of the camera angles were those black and white horror camera angles where it's like a, you know, from underneath and you see someone's face and then there's like a you know what I mean?
Yeah,
lightning
absolutely.
flashing in the background, kind of like 1950s, 1960s horror movie stuff. And when I see that, as someone who's like seen those movies, that's all I see is like the stereotypical black and white horror look. Whereas with the 90s movie, it seems a little more gritty to me. And obviously that's because
for sure. I can see that.
In the 60s and with the budget, he was not going to be able to pull off realistic effects for sure. But the child in me who needs things to look good, you know what I mean? The 90s version visually just does it for me. It's so, the practical effect, the gritty down in the dirt kind of look to it, I loved it.
The zombies actually look dead, reanimated.
Yeah, that's another thing too, is they're visually convincing, you know, and the fact that you can see where the makeup is and stuff like Dawn of the Dead or the original Night of the Living Dead. When you're watching a movie, you can suspend disbelief to a degree, but once you've seen it look better, it's sort of hard to go back and put yourself in that same mindset, I think. Yeah,
for sure. There's just, I don't know, there's a charm to it. Like, they're the least scariest thing, but for the time, I'm sure it was like terrifying people.
Well, I mean, he's a good director too, so it does help that he knew how to show them and make them scary despite them looking like they did. Right.
But there was actually like one scene that really holds up to this day. It was what's the guy's name that's with Cooper?
Oh, Tommy.
Tommy. Was that
I'm almost
Uncle?
positive it's Tom.
Was that Uncle Angle in the original, or am I thinking of the remake where it's his
Uncle
uncle's-
Reese is the remake.
Okay, but do you remember that Tom finds the dead corpse upstairs in the
Mhm.
original, and just like it was just like a skull with like an eyeball. It's like a bloody
Yeah,
mess.
I remember the eyeball specifically.
Yeah, that still is like it holds up so well. It's like, oh, that's visually creepy.
Yeah. There's a scene in Dawn of the Dead I think is very similar where they come across in the apartment building where they had been keeping the dead, and they had just had zombified, and there are different types of corpses. Some of them are missing limbs. Some of them you could see like the bones, and it was just very dirty looking. And that's how in the original Night of the Living Dead, that scene of that guy's eaten upper torso, it just looked dirty and almost real because of how gross it looked. Whereas nowadays they'd make it look nice and like, yeah, believable, and you'd see it as fiction looking believable, whereas this stuff is like, this could be like footage from a car accident, you know?
Right. Yeah. I'm trying not to like deter too much from the topic at hand, but how do you feel about the Dawn of the Dead remake, Zack Snyder's?
It's good.
Take.
I like it a lot, and I think at the time it was the best zombie movie available for sure. I do prefer the Romero style walking zombies and not the runners quite so much, but they did a really good job of making them scary, and that helps a lot. For some reason, maybe it's because I first saw the original concept of zombies shambling forward. That's scary to me, whereas when someone's running and they look like they have purpose and control over their body, I lose whatever it is that about zombies that kind of innately makes me scared of them. But with that one, he did a good job of showing them as doing the more traditional zombie stuff, eating people and acting stupid, that the aggression and the fast movement didn't deter too much. And then it, just like the original Dawn of the Dead, it was a movie about interesting characters. The zombies were just going on around them. Yeah. And he did a good job with that, I feel like. It was good overall.
I just, all that too, but I just like how like it was like the first zombie movie where I felt like it was on this huge scale. It was like a pandemic. Like you could see it not from the small little farmhouse, but like on a worldwide scale in a sense, or nationwide scale in a sense. But yeah, that really did it for me. And I know it's probably kind of sacrilege, but I think I prefer the remake of Dawn of the Dead more than the original.
Whereas I get that. I do. Yeah, I think I might, if I'm gonna sit down and enjoy a movie, it's in the Dead trilogy like that, I'd probably Dawn of the Dead remake over original. I could see that. Yeah.
I don't know. It's just much more polished. I mean, I do enjoy older cinema. I can appreciate it, but sometimes, you just want something that's really, it like having a little bit of Hollywood sheen or modern Hollywood sheen to it.
For sure. And you know what I've always really enjoyed about a zombie movie is when they really show you a good zombie outbreak when it starts, And the beginning of Dawn of the Dead remake with them just being in a working class neighborhood, and it's just, they did a really good job.
That car and
my God, it's so good. They show you how the world works normally, and then they overnight ruin it for you. So you really feel that, holy shit, everything has changed here. Versus if they start and the zombies have already taken over, you don't get quite so much of that context. Right, he did a great job on that intro.
Yeah, it was probably one of the best. Still in my memory, it's one of the best.
Yeah, it's killer.
I also kind of felt that way with, it's not really a zombie movie, kind of is, but 28 Days Later, that feeling of like, there's something about ghost towns that just creep me out. So London, I think he starts out in London. It's so vacant. It's like, it was so eerie.
It's really cool.
But I say that I wouldn't really classify it as a zombie movie because they're not dead. They're just infected. And that's another thing where when you said that you didn't like the fast moving zombies, I totally agree. It kind of defeats the purpose of a zombie. They're dead, reanimated by like, like when they have a purpose. And that's where Zack Snyder just like went too far with that with what's that new title he put out?
Oh, it was on like it was a streaming thing, right? Was it the one where they're in Vegas? That was him?
Yeah, and there's like a zombie tiger.
Yeah, the Dead Army or something like that. Yeah,
Army
I
of the
remember.
Dead.
Army
Yeah,
of the
Army
Dead.
of
There
the
we go.
Dead. Yeah. Ooh, yeah. It kind of falls in like just schlock territory where it's just so zany that it's like
it's almost like
enjoyable.
like one of those exploitation movies where it's like you come up with a concept and then you're basically parodying that concept.
Yeah.
It's like, hey, here's zombies. Isn't that crazy, guys? No, you could just have made a zombie movie. You didn't need to make it so tongue-in-cheek at yourself.
Which, I mean, I see why kind of the stakes were upped, I guess. It's like zombies have kind of been done to death, and although personally I would just like to see another zombie movie, I'm sure people are like, no, I want to see more from zombies.
Mm-hmm.
But I just don't think zombies is the place to do it. I don't know.
Yeah, I mean,
I like the generic thing of having zombies. Yeah.
Well, because you like the concept, and it's fun seeing it in different ways from different interpretations.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas,
Absolutely.
like, it doesn't always have to be. You could just make a movie about zombies. It doesn't have to be your typical George Romero, where the zombies are the backdrop, but the real thing is the character drama. You can just make a zombie movie. There are plenty of good zombie movies that are just about zombies. And if you want to throw in social commentary or something like that, feel free. You can, during the uprising, the zombie outbreak, the government took these really terrible steps or something. That'll be your commentary on like government overreach or something. Mm-hmm. And then someone who wants to just enjoy that movie never has to engage with that commentary. And someone who does, it's made a little bit better because
there's something a little extra for kind of just something for everybody, I guess. But I mean, zombies is kind of like the genre, the best way to kind of fit in social commentary. I feel like because you put humans at like this very fight or flight stance, and you see how they behave with each other, and you see people's true colors, which I find very fascinating.
Sure,
that you can't really get out of another type of movie.
Yeah.
It really is I just love the concept of zombies so much that
yeah,
like it is generic, but it works. Yeah.
Oh yeah, it is. It's super generic, and like you said, it has been done to death, and that's from two people who enjoy the genre.
Yeah.
But the concept of Zelda games have also been done to death, but there's always that spin they can put on the next title. We could definitely do that with zombie. I think actually the upcoming Resident Evil movie will reinvigorate. We'll probably see some more mid-tier budget level zombie movies come out if Resident Evil does well enough. And I'm probably more excited to see the result of Resident Evil hitting theaters than I am to actually watch it.
Right. When was the last Resident Evil that hit theaters?
Oh Christ, that was like 2017 or 18.
I didn't know it was that recent. I thought the first one was theaters and everything else was like straight to
you would be I would understand why you would think that, but no, they were giant big box office sellers.
Oh gosh.
Like they were huge, which is why they were so bad.
Yeah, but this one, it's taking not as many liberties. It's kind of it feels like just the story of
I think it is though.
RE2 or
a lot of people are saying that I like it because they have Itchy Tasty, and then you can see that there's like characters from the series on posters and all. I get that, and they are trying to give us a lot of like fan service, which is good because we RE fans deserve fan service. But they're changing so much. Wesker and Jill have a relationship. Stars is like a small town sheriff's office and like a mountain town or something. Which sure, okay, it's not that big of a change, but realistically, would a small mountain town have an elite SWAT team available to them?
Yeah.
So Stars doesn't make sense as a concept. I haven't seen it, so all of this could get explained really well. But I think they are changing a lot, and a lot of people tend to see the surface level elements, like, okay, they're wearing Stars uniforms. Brad's in the movie, right? They show the mansion. ipso facto, it's a very accurate. And I'm like, no, I think they're taking a lot more liberties than people are okay with admitting. But it's just they're showing so much like squee, like, oh, it's RE stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And I get that. I feel that way too. But at the same time, I've been burned on this road before.
Mm-hmm. Oh, I just meant like in a sense where that Resident Evil with Mila.
Oh, how it technically, it wasn't Resident Evil at all.
It was like
I
OC
will say
character,
for sure.
yeah.
It is certainly surpassed in just the trailer that I've seen. As far as being Resident Evil, it is certainly overtaken
For
current
sure.
RE movies.
It's like, oh, this is actually a Resident Evil property.
Yeah.
Whereas those movies, just like, oh, it just shares the same name and umbrella, and yeah. Oh, what else can you say about this movie and the original? I mean, they're just classics. They're both classics at this point, and both really good watches. They differ slightly. The endings are slightly different.
Yeah.
And
Which one
Barbara,
do you
the
prefer?
character, probably the first one. You know me. I love the original.
I'm all about the remake one. I like we probably shouldn't ruin it. Someone might want to watch it. I won't ruin it, but I think that the approach to why the ending took place, I don't know, it just felt really cool in the remake.
I see that, and it felt like this world could have been expanded upon, like sequel bait kind of. That's how I kind of walked away from it. Whereas like the original is like a self-contained, simple ending, like a self-contained story.
I get that.
Yeah. I do like Barbara as a character much more in the remake.
I think everyone does.
Yeah.
She goes catatonic past like the 25-minute mark in the
Yeah,
original.
it's like she's not even she's hardly a character. But I do buy the acting of that actress, and it was really well done in the original.
Yeah.
It's like someone would freak out like that, or just like think they're dreaming. Yeah, it's
I mean, someone who's not well enough put together, and you put them in a situation like that, they'll break for sure. The only thing is that might not be the most interesting thing to watch on film.
Right. It's believable, but it's not really interesting. Yeah, absolutely. Do you prefer the original Ben or the remake Ben?
I mean, you can't. Tony Todd delivers a hell of a performance in remake. That's what originally sold it to me. You know, scrolling through the channels, you see Tony Todd's face. And I'm like, oh yeah, I'm familiar with him. And he's delivering a monologue with tears just running down his eyes, you know. And in this movie, it wasn't low budget by any means, but it was not a big, AAA production.
Right.
And he's putting tears into his performance. Like, I don't know, man.
He sold it for sure.
Just on the actor alone. I think the characters are really similar. Very take charge, very, strong and trying to be cunning and figure out what to do. The leader type aesthetic. I enjoy that, and I think it's probably about similar. But I think Tony Todd is what makes it for me.
I agree, but I do really like how the original actor for Ben, he did it. I think that's the thing I appreciate about 68 so much. It's like the acting doesn't feel like a early 70s, late 60s movie acting, and there's not like that annoying mid-Atlantic accent that used to be prevalent. All that.
Hey, what's the big idea with these zombies here?
Yeah, what are we gonna do about these zombies? The characters were believable, and it is such a great movie to me. It's one of my favorites.
Oh yeah.
Cooper, both of them. I really love both portrayals of Cooper. They're about the same, actually. They did a really good casting of the remake.
Yeah, well, because you hate him, and they want you to hate him, but then throughout the movie, you see him, and he's trying to protect his daughter, and you go, well, I kind of understand.
You would
maybe not his reasoning, but why he's getting to that point.
He's a little irrational. He's leaning more on feelings rather than logic.
Sure,
but that's you have to create that dynamic.
Yeah. And I love the tension between him and Ben. It's such a good, just you know, you could see where both of them are coming from. Cooper says, hey, we'll be safe in the basement, which I could, okay, yeah, sure. But then Ben's like, well, you can't get out of the basement. Solid point, Ben, right? So we have this good point counterpoint thing going on, where it's like, while Cooper is supposed to be hated because his personality is so bad, you don't necessarily disagree with him.
Right. But there are like some moments of the film where he's like hesitant to help Ben in like a life or death situation. It's like your character's kind of a bad person.
Yeah. No, it's great as a character you just love to hate.
Mm-hmm. And that's kind of something I didn't particularly enjoy about the remake is these characters are kind of black and white, whereas I feel in the original they're a little bit more nuanced.
Interesting.
But that's just how I feel. Like
it does kind of make sense. So you have, so Barbara sort of like turns into a hard ass towards the end, but then the Tommy's girlfriend also was take charge. You know, she's like, I want to drive. You know, I'm driving the truck. Everybody sort of was a better version of what was in the 1968 movie from like a movie watching standpoint. It did kind of make them look a little more perfect, I guess you could say, in the remake.
Yeah, and there's nothing wrong with that. But it kind of felt like just a real life scenario in the original. It's like, oh, these are just people, and in this shitty situation. Whereas 90s, it felt much more like a film, you know.
Sure, I could see that.
But from what you said, like, George Romero wrote the screenplay again for this one. He fixed, what he saw as flaws in the original, or something that could have been explored a little bit more. So,
I'm glad he did it, and I'm glad Savini directed it, honestly, because it is such a different movie. I mean, any other zombie movie that's ever been made, Night of the Living Dead has just such a distinct feel to it. And the way it approaches the whole zombie thing, even after George Romero had written, and produced and directed 3 of like the best zombie movies, you have Night of the Living Dead come out, which still to this day I don't think feels like any of the Dead trilogy and any other zombie movie that's been made. Like, such a fucking awesome movie. I can't stand it. It's so good.
I totally get where you're coming from. It's one of a kind. Like, nothing has replicated the feeling of it or anything like that. So, and it's weird because it's like, I don't know. It's one of those remakes where I can kind of separate it from the original property. Yeah. Like, it does follow some of the story beats, but it's like, it does feel like a wholly different film in some regard.
Yeah. Like RE2 versus RE2 remake.
Yeah, exactly. It's like, there's some of that there, but it's radically different. So I appreciate it. And it was a treat, because it's going to sound bad to say, I wasn't cognizant of a remake of Night of the Living Dead. I know that sounds weird. It feels like something I should know, but I was like, it caught me by surprise. I'm like, oh, I never knew there was a remake.
See, that's cool.
By Tom Savini, of all people. So this really was a treat and a great excuse to watch it. So I appreciate, do you rate things? I know you usually don't, but we usually kind of rate the films we talk about. You don't have to, of course. But.
So here's the thing with me rating stuff is it's never constant, because it depends on what mood I'm in that day. Sure. So people will be like, hey, what's your favorite Resident Evil game? And I'm like, tonight, 2. Tomorrow, Code Veronica,
Yeah.
But if I had to rate Night of the Living Dead, I'd do it 2 different ways. As a movie, just something you could watch, I would give it like a good 7 out of 10. You could just watch drama and action and dread. It's not the best movie ever made in that sense, but it's something you could totally watch. It's above average. But as a zombie movie, I would give it like 10 out of 10. That's the approach you should have if you're trying to accomplish these goals. Like, if you want to make a big overblown production like The Walking Dead, where you have a bunch of different locations and you're trying to make a cohesive world, sure. But if you're trying to show a very small, magnified section of the earth while it's going through this zombie outbreak, Night of the Living Dead's the way you do it.
I agree. And I'm like right up there with you. I've rated it 7 out of 10. And I will certainly rewatch it. It seems like one of those movies you could just have on and rewatch a lot. It feels like it's starting to become a comfort film like the original is for me.
Nice.
But yeah, I agree with you. 7 out of 10. And as a zombie movie, hell yeah, probably 8 out of 10 or 9 out of 10
Nice.
for me. It's a great.
It's very
zombie film.
quotable too. Like when Ben jams the crowbar through that zombie's head, it's like, "God damn you, God damn all of you!" Oh, it's just so
They're
good.
coming
Gives me
for you,
goosebumps.
Barbara. Yeah,
It's so
Johnny at the
fucking good.
beginning. Oh, that neck cracking scene was brutal in the remake.
Oh yeah, if you
Much
watch
more
in slow motion
impactful.
now,
Yeah,
you can
much
see
more
that it's
impactful
clearly.
visual.
But holy shit, on an old CRT with a VHS tape playing it, that effect looked real. Like they just crushed that dude's head.
Absolutely.
Damn, it was good.
Yeah, that's kind of the the drawback of like such ultra high definition of stuff. You see the flaws and everything.
Yeah.
Like
With
you
some
can even
stuff,
like point out dead pixels in some films
oh yeah,
and stuff like
for
that.
sure.
So-
Or when there's dirt on the camera lens, you know.
yeah. It's like, can we go back to the 480p
Mhm.
resolution?
Yeah, I'm
where
always
things were
about.
kind of compressed.
Yeah, I upscale all my old like retro video games and stuff, and I like seeing them in HD. And that is one of the, you do see the flaws as well.
Mhm.
You have like electrical interference on the video line, so you see some static in this scene. Or I'm playing Parasite Eve 1 right now, and on a CRT smushed down, and on a 26-inch screen, Aya Brea looks like a human being. But when you blow it up on a 1440p screen, you can see each individual pixel that makes up her iris when she's standing far away.
Yeah, absolutely.
So that's a learn to love thing, but I think it's just all negative with cinema. If you take old movies that have special effects, practical effects in them, and then transfer them to like Blu-ray or some kind of like uncompressed 8K DVD or something, you can see all those flaws, and they aren't. It's not as cool seeing those flaws as it is with like video game footage. It kind
It's
of
not as charming.
yeah. It's that
Yeah.
charming is the yes, exactly.
You're kind of like, you become cynical at that point. Like, damn, did they try on this film?
Mhm.
But yeah, that's the thing with video games as well. Like early 3D games is that, I don't know, it feels like when you upscale it on PC and stuff, it takes away some of the atmosphere that was prevalent in the original resolutions that it was supposed to be on. Like
Yeah,
everything looks kind of too pristine and clean.
I
It's
get
just
that, which
off-putting
is
for me.
so you are right that it is a more pristine and clean look, but that's exactly why I like doing actual console hardware and then upscaling after the fact, because you get to see the imperfections of the
Mhm.
PS1's video output, let's say, versus having it in an emulator and it being perfect. Some of that analog noise, it's like when you listen to a record on a good turntable. It's technically imperfect pops and hisses and the recording and the playback, but there's a warmth there. There's something, there's something to it that's a little different and a little less sterilized and perfect.
Mm-hmm.
With old video game footage, it's very good to have the analog video coming out of the console, and then you mess around with the signal with like a RetroTink 5X or FrameMeister, so you get to see not only the pixels, that make up the picture blown up, but the little flaws that also make it up too.
For sure. It's kind of like I forget what that effect is called when something looks too real or too perfect.
Oh, the uncanny valley.
Uncanny Valley, yeah. So it kind of plays into that. When there's like imperfections and flaws and things, I think we gravitate towards it more, because if something's like,
Sure.
because we know within ourselves we're not perfect. So when we see something that's perfect, kind of freaks us out.
Yeah. Yeah,
Um,
early CG didn't have like texturing, which
Yeah,
we never
yeah.
saw as realistic looking because you can't see pores and skin or whatever, right?
Mm-hmm. So if you like blow up or upscale like Jurassic Park, the dinosaurs, it's like, ugh.
Yeah.
But originally it's like, oh, this looks there's a dinosaur there,
Mm.
And I don't know. I feel like video games nowadays is going down that route. It's like, why are you trying to make everything look like real?
Yeah.
It not only does it age it, but it kind of like, I don't know. it makes me, I don't know, too spoiled, I guess, because when I go back to older games, I'm like, ugh, this doesn't. I'll still play it because it's a fun game, but just being spoiled by like the hyper, realistic or realism in video games nowadays. And also, you have to have like 200 gigabytes of SSD to install it. Like, I think Warzone's like 250. So I dropped that game fast after its initial launch.
I don't fucking blame you. I don't know. Yeah, the realistic graphics thing. So I like that they're going in that direction, but I think they're prioritizing that instead of stuff that makes the game more playable, like frame rate. What was that one game that came out on PS4 with like the werewolves in it?
Oh, 1884 New Order?
Yeah, New Order. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
They really prioritized the look of the game, and they're like, guys, we're going to have to make it, Oh, wait, what did they say? They're making it 20 FPS or 30 FPS because it's more cinematic or something.
It's just a movie.
Which is a lie. You're doing it because you made the game look so good. You can't run it consistently.
You can't run it on PS4 at that frame rate, exactly.
Yeah, people tend to prioritize that too much, which really sucks. But I'm playing through Stalker right now and doing videos on them, and I'm really coming to appreciate how much ground has been gained as far as realistic ambient lighting goes and perspective correct shadow casting and stuff. So I'm too much of a geek, and I get too much into those things to not appreciate that they're being used on a wide scale in modern video games.
I get that, and I guess it's always been like that in the gaming market. It's like better graphics. It's always been like that. It's not like, oh, let's make this look purposely shitty or low texture and polygons. It's just the limitations. And now that technology has advanced so fast, developers can finally express their imagination in a more believable way. So I get that. It's just the return of like having to wait all day to install a game just to play it is kind of off-putting to me. I just miss the days where you could just slip in a disc or just download something in like less than 30 minutes and play it.
Yeah, you basically can't. I mean, it's not reasonable to be a console fanboy anymore because they're just PCs. There's no all the upsides that consoles used to have. I just put a game in and I play it. You can't do that anymore. Even with the game disc, you're gonna have to install 150 games.
Yeah, exactly. It's like,
I don't so much mind doing that quite so much. I like it when the process of playing a video game involves some sort of pageantry of some kind. Like when me and my wife bought the FF7 remake. We're just like, oh fuck, it's installing. What do we do? It's super inconvenient for sure. It's just one of those dumb little things I get into. So I'm fine with consoles gravitating more towards being like the PC because we're already seeing an increase in our options as far as being on console. We can change the resolution of the games we play on console now. Frame rate, we can prioritize, does the game look good at 4K or do we want to run it at 60 FPS? And Xbox, the new one can run at like like 120, 140 FPS. We're starting to get to that level. So I'm happy we're moving in that direction, but I do have a PS1 right over here. I could just put a disc in and I never have to worry about it. And my wife dropped it yesterday and it still works.
Yeah.
So I get why people would prioritize like consoles how they used to be, but just realistically speaking, you can't fanboy for them anymore because they're just small, contained, limited gaming PCs.
Especially with like the new Xbox, it's like Game Pass is on PC. It's like, what's the incentive to get one? I guess to play on your TV, but I mean, you could easily HDMI your PC to a TV.
Oh yeah, exactly.
So it's like, I guess I haven't bought a console in years, but I guess the incentive for me would be like the PlayStation 5 with the exclusive. Like I really want to play the Demon Souls remake and I can't get that anyplace else. So
yeah,
that would be like my only incentive. And I don't want to that badly to purchase it for $800. It's just to play one game. It's just not worth it. So that's why I kind of have a disdain for the market.
Sure.
Nowadays, but I don't know. I think it'll get worse before it gets better, but I think it will get better eventually.
Yeah, it's like I said about Hollywood. We're going to have to see a bit of a crash, and then once people know we can't spend $40 million on developing a video game anymore because we may not make that back, we start to see things that don't require $40 million to create something like Resident Evil 1 or 2, where it's I wouldn't say more simplistic, but more limited, and how you were talking about how limitations can often just spur creativity. We'll see that because the industry won't be this giant, money shitting goose anymore. They'll have to actually produce a video game to get any money. And when you don't have the funds available to you, you have to start creatively figuring out ways to show what you want to show. We'll start seeing a little bit more of that heart come back to video games.
And it's still there. Like, there's much more of a platform for independent developers to shine through, and there wasn't a market for that even like more than 10 years ago.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, that's definitely helped. And I have some favorite indie titles, but they're not like, they don't remain in my brain as like big properties like Mario, Zelda, Resident Evil. Yeah. I guess Minecraft, but I feel like I'm too old to play Minecraft now. It's just not fun to me anymore. You can fall down a rabbit hole with it, but I feel like, now I'm going on a tangent about Minecraft. They've added so much stuff to it, so I'm overwhelmed by the options. I was like, no, just get away from me. There's too much to do. Too much. You're giving me too much freedom, so I don't want to play it. It's kind of weird, but yeah.
Literally anything.
Yeah, we could talk about literally anything, but it's just like people see the title of us covering Night of the Living Dead, and it's like they only talked about it for 15 minutes.
That is true. And if you're watching this and that's what happened, I do apologize. But if I start moving in a sideways tangent, I'll keep it going in that direction for a while. What else? Okay, so I will say this. This is a little embarrassing. After I saw the remake of Night of the Living Dead, it was so convincing to me as a little teenager watching, 480i broadcast on a CRT television at night. And it was late at night. Everyone was asleep. My brother was asleep, and I was just flipping through the channels. I found Night of the Living Dead. It had such a profound effect on me that we took like a little trip to Georgia to visit family. And I didn't want to sleep on the bottom floor because if zombies were going to get in, they're going to get in through the windows of the bottom floor. It genuinely, it creeped me out, man. I was a little scared baby for a while.
I completely understand. I think I was like more infatuated than creeped out. The video game that really creeped me out as a kid, RE2 did, because I remember I got that for Nintendo 64 at the time. But the one that really creeped me out was Silent Hill. Which one was it? 3. That beginning scene, or that beginning play where Heather's in like that dark, desolate amusement park.
Yeah.
That haunted me for years.
That's what did it for you? Is the amusement park? Yeah. Nice.
And now replaying it as a teenager and as an adult, I'm like, I appreciate it, but it's like not scary in the slightest.
Yeah. Don't you wish that if you could take a pill right now, to forget that experience with Silent Hill 3 so that you could have it again fresh, would you do it?
If there's no drawbacks or any side effects, absolutely.
Yeah. So that's because here's my thing with the hypothetical. I cherish my first experience with Final Fantasy VII, and even though I love the game, playing it now, I will just revel in the nostalgia, but I don't get that same first experience. I don't watch Eris's death scene, and it doesn't almost bring me to tears like it did when I first saw it. If I could take that pill, my only question is, would I chance me not liking it after that? When I took the pill and I forgot it.
Tastes are different or they develop. Right? Yeah, so it may not have that same impact as it initially did.
It has some philosophical complications for sure.
Yeah, for sure. It's like you end up like hating the property. It's like, this is not for me. Whereas originally
be a net negative on my life.
Yeah. But if there was not that drawback, absolutely. Like it's hard to find something, because I love horror. I've been a fan all my life, but it's hard. I've been so desensitized to everything that it's just hard to find an experience. RE2 Remake kind of did that for me a little bit. If you dim down the lights, it's nighttime, it'll do it for you, but it's like it's just not that same feeling as a
Yeah.
kid.
And it's weird though, because you're desiring for a negative emotion. You're like, God, I really
that's
hope
kinda
I get
weird.
mad pretty soon, right?
Right.
It's such an interesting. I have this weird. Like theory about why we like horror movies. I think people like to experience negative stuff in a safe environment in low doses because it's interesting to, like, we watch a movie about a drama about someone whose like parent passed away. Like, why would you watch? That seems like something that there's nothing good about that.
It's like baggage.
We sort of like feeling how that might feel in a very controlled environment in very small doses. And with fear, we want to go to a horror movie specifically to get scared.
Yeah.
You sort of want to experience those extreme things without going through the extreme circumstances that would cause them. It's kind of cool. It's an interesting idea. Like, other than that, you just couldn't imagine why someone would just jab themselves in the arm with a knife every once in a while. Like, just do something negative to themselves for no reason. I think we want to feel it's desirable.
Right.
Or we're curious. It's like, I wonder what it's
we're
like
very
to lose
curious.
someone.
Yeah,
you know?
yeah. It's like I want that feeling without it being a direct threat. It's kind of like horror houses, like you have like the chainsaw prop. There's like, I've been the one where there's like Leatherface and Michael Myers and all that.
Right.
And it's believable, and you get that shock without
any real
consequences.
Danger, and
yeah,
you shut it off immediately.
Yeah, exactly. And I mean, we as humans, we kind of thrive on negativity. It's just kind of in human nature. So there is something to that. It's like, I want to feel a little bit of negativity right now.
Yeah, for sure.
Kind of seek it out. But
I listen to angry music all the time. You shouldn't want to be that way, but there's something cathartic about it.
Yeah, it's kind of like just therapeutic. It makes you a nicer person to be surrounded by these kind of negative influences. I don't know.
That's called living in Florida.
Yeah, absolutely. Oh man, I could honestly talk to you for hours, but I don't want like a 4-hour podcast and 20 minutes being about
Tom Savini's Night. We'll get there.
Yeah. But Jared, I really appreciate you being on the show, man. It's been a treat for sure.
Hell yeah, no problem. It's a pleasure.
Listeners, yeah. So yeah, this has been episode 32. This might be the last special for Scoochtober, unfortunately, unless my co-host gets better and we'll cover some A24 horror films. But thank you all for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.